Today on the newscast, a mysterious airstrike against Iran-backed militias along the Iraq-Syria border. Who was behind it? Get my thoughts coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We've got a bit of a Middle East mystery on our hands today, Wednesday, September 15th. Yesterday, various Middle East media outlets reported that there were airstrikes against Iran-backed militias in eastern Syria along Syria's border with Iraq. Now, according to various reports, including from the Iranian-backed militias themselves, drones carried out airstrikes against a convoy, at least perhaps 4 vehicles. Again, according to these Middle East media reports, some reports have said 3 were killed, but these drones apparently targeted a convoy of vehicles traveling along that Iraq-Syria border. The vehicles were operated by those Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militias, also known as the Popular Mobilization Units. Now, that's kind of the broader name, almost an umbrella group type name for these various Iraqi Shia militias that are operating inside Iraq with the full backing, training, funding, and support of the Iranian regime. So we have this airstrike. There are images of explosions. You can see it here on the screen, some flames in the aftermath. Again, some reports say 3 people were killed, 3 jihadis were killed. These Iranian-backed militias say no one was killed, but the vehicles were destroyed. As you can tell, folks, there are conflicting reports from on the ground, and it's a bit of a mystery in that right away, the Popular Mobilization Units, or PMUs for short, again, that's the broader name for these various Shia militias, they accused the United States of carrying out these airstrikes. Again, remember, the U.S. obviously has a presence in Iraq and Syria, which these Iranian-backed militias have targeted time and time again, as we've told you many times here on the newscast. Some 2,500, I think 2,000 or 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq right now, 900 U.S. soldiers in eastern Syria. And again, they have been a target of the Iranian regime and its proxies. So right away, Iran, its proxies point the finger at the United States. But here is the interesting thing. The U.S. released a statement, at least the U.S.-led coalition, released a statement saying, we were not behind the airstrikes targeting the Popular Mobilization Units, these Iran-backed militias, along the Iraq-Syria border. Now, in other instances this year, twice, since January 2021, when President Biden took office, the U.S. has carried out airstrikes along that Iraq-Syria border against these very Iranian-backed Shia militias. This time, however, the U.S. says we didn't do it. The other 2 instances, the United States was pretty upfront. Hey, we did it. It was a response to continued provocations by the Iranian regime and its proxies, who are continuing to target U.S. personnel inside Iraq. This time, however, the U.S. said no, we had no involvement. It would seem that they would have good reason to carry out strikes against these militias. Just this past weekend, as a matter of fact, and we reported on this on Monday's newscast. You can check it out in our archives. These Iraqi militias targeted the Erbil International Airport in northern Iraq, where there are U.S. troops stationed. Thankfully, that drone attack was unsuccessful, but you would say, okay, perhaps the U.S. is retaliating. So we have the denial, and now some of these Iraqi militias are shifting and saying, okay, maybe the United States, maybe the great Satan wasn't behind this attack. It had to be the little Satan, in their words, Israel. Now, Israel has neither confirmed nor denied any involvement in this airstrike yesterday, which is kind of the MO for the Israeli government. Rarely will Israel say, you know what, we did it, we were behind it. And when Israel does do that, it is to send a direct message to some enemy in the region, usually connected to the Iranian regime, but silence by Israel in this case, and the U.S. denies any involvement, which again is pretty rare. Those other 2 strikes, the U.S. said, hey, we did it, and as a warning to Iran and its proxies, but could Israel have been behind this strike? That was the question in the title of this newscast. I believe there is a good chance that, yes, indeed, Israel may have carried out this strike. Again, we don't know for certain, and no one will probably claim responsibility at the end of the day. But if you look at the track record, folks, Israel has carried out hundreds, if not thousands, of airstrikes against Iranian targets and Iranian proxies like these militias, like Hezbollah, inside Syria. Now, that's one thing. Usually these strikes would be from the central part of Syria over to the west along Israel's border with Syria, a bit closer to home. This strike would have targeted, again, this is a bit of a way from Israel, the Syria-Iraq border. That's pretty far to the east, but there is a track record, not a lengthy one, but we do know that Israel has carried out some, at least, airstrikes near that Iraq-Syria border over the past few years. So I'm saying this is not beyond the realm of possibility that Israeli drones or fighter jets would operate that far to the east. That's one thing to keep in mind. Obviously, as I mentioned, Israel's track record of targeting Iran and not allowing Iran to establish a beachhead in Syria, or perhaps even more importantly, transit advanced weapons through Syria that can be used against Israel. I'm talking in particular about those precision-guided munitions, PGMs for short. Hey, don't get confused. I know we've got the popular mobilization units, PMUs. Then we've got the precision-guided missiles, PGMs. Both are bad and dangerous to Israel and the United States. Should be your big takeaway here. Don't get caught up in the acronyms. But these precision-guided missiles, for Israel, a red line and a game changer. And we have discussed this on previous newscasts. Basically, they do exactly what their name says. They hit the target with precision and accuracy. Israel says, no way will we allow Iran and its proxies to possess these kinds of weapons. But that's exactly what Iran is trying to make happen. They're transiting PGM parts through Syria, potentially into southern Lebanon, into the hands of their most lethal proxy, Hezbollah. Then Hezbollah takes the parts and they assemble these missiles in Lebanon. That is the goal, and Israel says no way. And those PGMs are really the main reason Israel has carried out so many airstrikes against Iranian assets in Syria over the past several years. Was that the case here? Open question that may never be answered, as we know, but a key point to remember, folks, this Iraq-Syria border crossing is a key transit point in Iran's goal, the Iranian regime's goal, to establish a highway from Iran all the way to the Mediterranean, a corridor stretching from Iran, through Iraq, through Syria, through Lebanon, all the way to the Mediterranean at Israel's doorstep. And again, Israel isn't going to allow that either. But as much as Israel has struck out against Iranian targets, or struck Iranian targets over the years, Iran continues to persist, Iran and its proxies, in trying to establish that very land corridor we're discussing and that very beachhead on Israel's borders, complete with those precision-guided missiles. So the plot thickens and the tit for tat continues without a doubt. If we get any more details about this strike and the real story behind it, we will absolutely let you know right here on the Watchman Newscast. Fascinating times in the world's most chaotic, most volatile, and most pivotal region. We want to be your one-stop shop for all things Middle East. So be sure to subscribe, click the notification bell here on the newscast. Also, you can follow us on social media. We're posting there every day as well. Facebook, I believe, is at Erick Stakelbeck, as is Twitter. And then Instagram is Erick.Stakelbeck. So check us out there. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Keep this entire situation in the Middle East in your prayers, because, folks, time is short and we need to wake up because Jesus is at the door. Thanks so much for joining us here in the newscast. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.